All right, so it's connecting right now, and excuse me, but if anybody is listening, just want to let you all know we're not going to be ignoring comments during this time. For those that do comments or want to comment as we go along, uh, just wanted to let you know that the Facebook and the software application that we're using to do this is we found out there's a 10-second delay between real time and what you see on Facebook. So if we answer a little bit later than what you thought, it's not because we're ignoring you. It's just, again, it's a 10 to 15 second delay we found that happens. So once again, like we said on our promo, we'd like to thank you and welcome you to Paranormal Research Investigations, our first live stream interview. My name is Ramiro Galvan, and this year marks my 20th year of investigating paranormal phenomena. Now, some of you have seen that we've done live streams before prior to an investigation, and we do that to give people and viewers an idea of where we are and stories about the location. We've done live streams before prior, and they seem to be, people really enjoyed it. So what we've done is we decided to go ahead and do something different. Now, let me give you a little bit of background. When we go into investigations, we typically break it down into 3 phases. That's survey and research of the location, actual investigation, and the final review of the client. The final product is often seen and heard from the investigator's perspective. And a lot of times what you see on our Facebook page is from the investigator's perspective. But we started thinking and we thought, well, what about the client's perspective? Even on TV, when you see people, these TV shows doing these kind of things, oftentimes they'll say, okay, they investigated, they wrapped up, and then they left. Well, what about from the client's perspective? What is it that they saw before, during, and after the investigation? So it was great to be able to hear directly from them and have them share their experiences with us. So again, we want to do something different, so that's what we're going to do. Our guest tonight will be doing is he's going to be given a firsthand account of his side of the story from seeing through his eyes. So having said that, today's guest is David Calzada. He's currently the assistant fire chief of the fire and rescue station in Fabens, Texas. In July, a little bit of background here, in July of 2019, the producers from the Travel Channel show Paranormal 911 reached out to me asking me if I knew of any first responder stories in El Paso that they could film. I asked around and got David's name. So David and I first spoke in July, as a matter of fact, the same month of 2019. And we were talking about this, and David started telling me some stories about this place. So anyway, one thing led to another, and next thing you know, we're investigating the station in August of 2019. Let's just say that what we experienced and recorded the night that we did that, not only amazed us, but also, in my opinion, corroborated many of the staff stories and encounters there. So let me introduce, without further ado, here's David. Hey, David. Good. Hey, I'm glad you could join us here for this first live interview. Thank you, and get a perspective from you, the client, as to, again, what I mentioned before, what was being said or what you all experienced before, during, and after. But before we do that, let me go ahead and pull up a picture here of your location. And this is a photo from 2014 of your fire station. Tell me if that looks pretty correct.
Yes, that's correct. That's a station when I first originally started.
Okay. Now, where I'm pointing in this area, that is the old hospital. Is that correct? Or can you break it down for us?
So the furthest to the right lower, that used to be kind of the whole building was an actual hospital back in the 50s and 60s. The colored roof portion on the bottom right, that ended up turning into a pizzeria about maybe the late 80s, early 90s.
This part right here?
And then, that's correct.
Okay.
And then that little L formation a little further to the back of the building, That's a second story area where Life Ambulance used to have their crew spend the night. That was their Life Ambulance station.
And what about this part of the building? Was that still the hospital back in 2014, or was it no longer a hospital?
No, 2014, no. That was completely being used for storage. The front side of that building had a small beauty shop and I guess some sort of a housing authority. And the like it was about maybe about the very front area of that building. The whole rest of it, about maybe 75% of it, was storage.
Okay. So that's a street shop from 2014.
Right.
That's some of the things that you were just describing. And this is from the other side of there's an alley that runs behind there. This is
Right.
this was an open courtyard area, is that correct?
That's correct. I guess that's where the pizzeria used to store some of their equipment and whatever they just had to put back there.
Okay.
I'm really glad you brought that up. I didn't even know about this picture. But if you look on the right side, right by the telephone post, it looks like a chimney.
Right.
That's where the incinerator was for the hospital, where they would burn all their biohazard, and they had a surgical unit, and that's where they'd burn all the, I guess you could say, the biohazard waste, tissue, whatever they had.
Really? Okay.
Mhm.
That wasn't brought to our attention during the time of the investigation, which
No,
is
yeah, I didn't have a picture to go off of. I didn't know you had this picture. Otherwise, I'd be able to tell you. But that second story, that's the life station right there.
so. Now let's go to the other side here. So that's right there is the life station there, the life ambulance building that you guys stayed in. Is that correct?
That's correct. On that second floor, yes, sir. And
Okay.
then right underneath the stairs, um, that little colored portion, that was actually kind of like a fenced-in metal
Okay.
screening, and that went downstairs to the basement.
Okay. Now, when we went in to investigate, we were told that this is where they used to bring the bodies out to load them up into the hearses. Is that correct?
That's
From the
correct.
okay. So this was basically a loading platform for the
That's
deceased.
correct. Well, what it is there's a you can't really see it that well, but it looks like a window right there by that wall.
Right
There's a
here?
metal door there, and they would have that locked for security reasons. And then it's stairs that go down along that wall down into the basement area.
Okay. So David, I want you to tell me a bit, or tell the people who are watching a bit about yourself. In other words, when did you start there at Fabens, and what building you started in, and kind of maybe started telling us a little bit more also about some of the experiences that first began there, not only with you, but with other people there as well.
Well, I grew up in Fabens my whole life. I was born and raised there. I joined EMS fire department about maybe 15 years ago, and I got my start there at the life ambulance station there. And I didn't really join the fire department until about 10 years ago. Um, the weird part about it, I would hear all these stories, and a lot of these ghost stories stem from like prior people. Life ambulance would stay there up since the early 90s. So before I got there, there was already maybe about a decade's worth of stories. And it's weird because the stories, I guess, got changed along the way. Like the experiences started changing. So you would hear these stories about an elderly couple going up to the door. The partner goes to get his, the one person would get his partner, come back, and they're gone. And then slowly but surely, started evolving into, way different experiences. Um, with me, I mean, I had a few at the very beginning, um, but I mean that's as much as that. I mean, as far as like the history of the building, I know it's gone back to the 50s and 60s because my father used to go to the hospital there. He had an experience himself as a kid, but I mean that's I've grown up around that area for, like I said, all my life.
Well,
Uh,
that Fabens Hospital, I mean, it had a lot of stories before you started working there, I'm assuming.
oh
That's what,
yes, sir.
okay. What were some of the stories that you would hear about that place?
So a lot of the times, I mean, the very common one was the person knocking on the door, and when you go to get your partner, you come back, that person was gone, but then you'd get a 911 call, and it's usually something big. So when people started getting that experience, and I heard it several times from several different people prior to me starting, Um, Another thing also was you'd be asleep, you feel somebody hit you on the foot, and then sure enough, you can't go back to sleep, and then you get hit with a call. Um, as far as the fire side of it, I didn't hear a whole lot of stories from back then. I guess there's a lot of skepticism from the firefighters that back in that day. But as far as life ambulance, I mean, we had all sorts of experiences coming from that building. And I don't know if it was maybe the fact that that building got knocked down and everything kind of went over to the fire station side. I don't know if that's what caused all this, but I know back then, I mean, we had everything from footsteps to things moving. My very first day on the job, I had already my first experience there. So it's kind of unique. Everybody had their own weird stories, and everything from them doing a séance to the kid visiting them to the voices. I mean, all sorts of stuff.
Really?
Yes,
So
sir.
let me ask you there. When we were there to do the investigation, they told us some stories about that building, and they mentioned one place in particular was the basement. There used to be I'm assuming was a workout room in the basement, or at least that's what I understood.
No, the basement was kind of a storage area.
Okay.
The workout room was on the first floor. That one door on the first floor that you see on the picture. As soon as you walk into that door to the right was our weight room.
Okay.
And I mean, really, that whole building was just was crawling with all sorts of different things. Everything from footsteps to things moving. We even made a little haunted house for one Halloween, and we had things like we had a fire hydrant that tipped over. We had light bulbs falling off of when they were securely fastened.
Right.
We just all sorts of things moving. I mean, that was one of the more common ones.
Well, one of the things that a lot of people shared with us when we investigated was the morgue. That there was and I remember, but since the building's no longer there, I remember when we went there, they kept pointing out this is the loading dock for when they would bring the bodies out. So
Right.
I understand that the morgue was down those steps, like you mentioned earlier, correct?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
So you sent me a picture, and I hope you can see it there. But that's the steps that went down there once you enter that gate, correct?
No, that one is from the inside.
Oh, that's
Down
what.
to get into the
Okay.
basement, you had an entrance from the outside, which is your previous picture, and then this is from the inside.
Okay. So when you went down from the inside, what exactly did you what did you run into when you hit the foot of the stairs?
So right there at the very bottom of the steps, that door to your right is I guess you could say like the refrigeration room, because they had all sorts of metal, tables there. Um, it was just really creepy. There you go. That's a little better.
Okay.
If you notice, that's a metal door.
Right.
Um, that handle was kind of a rebar, I guess, that they fashioned into a door handle.
Okay.
And then further in is just this one large room, maybe about 10 by 10, and that's where we kept some of our equipment, some of our hoses,
Okay.
equipment that we didn't use. I don't know what it was used back in the days, in the hospital days, but when I was there, that's what we mostly used for storage.
Okay. So what was the actual morgue there in the basement? Was it by this door right here that we're seeing, by that area, or this is where I get
My
confused?
understanding, when you walk into that room, that's about maybe about I'd say about a 5 by 10 room. Um, I mean, when you go in there, I mean, there's all sorts of like metal equipment. There is some ventilation that goes in there, I guess, from maybe like a cooling
Okay.
system that they used to have. But that was pretty much where they kept everything in, or kept all the bodies, if you want to say that.
Really? Okay. Did you ever? I'm just morbid curiosity here. Did you ever participate in any removals like that?
Out of there, no.
Sorry,
No, that
just curiosity there.
no, that was long gone, or that they stopped using that way before I got there. I think by the time the 80s came around and I was born, I don't remember it ever being in a hospital at that time. I think by then it was already shut down.
Okay. So, but back when it was an active hospital, that was a morgue. And
That's correct.
okay.
Yeah, and judging by all the equipment that they had in there, I'm very sure that was the morgue area. That was the story that we were given, and based off of the stuff we found in there, yeah.
Were there other people who, when we were there, they were telling us stories about the building there themselves? We're talking about the life ambulance building, and one guy in particular told us that in the Bay Area of the you have two buildings there. You have the front building, and then you have the back building, which I call the pumper building. But in the front building, one guy would say that back when the life ambulance used to be there, that one of the doors, I guess, it connected to the building next door when it was up, that it would open on its own. It would slam shut sometimes on its own too. He said he couldn't sleep because of that. I don't know if you heard about that story.
No, not that one. No, it wouldn't surprise me because we used to hear doors all the time.
Really?
Yeah, and it was weird. I have a couple of buddies of mine that we decided when I first started at the apartment. Me and my buddies were real curious about ghosts and the paranormal and stuff. So I'd say about maybe 2 or 3 times we spent the night there, and it kind of toyed with us. I mean, it's not a small building. I mean, once you're in there, it's pretty big. But I mean, you'll be on one side, you hear footsteps on your side of the building, you run over there to see what's going on. You get there, nothing happens, and then you hear the footsteps clear on the other side of the building. So it was toying with us. So we're pretty much running back and forth all over the building trying to catch stuff, and we just never could.
Really? That was in the old hospital, huh?
Right. Yeah, on the first floor.
Wow. How about the second floor? I mean, some guys told me also about some experiences they had when they were upstairs on the second floor. I don't know.
On the life area, yeah, there's I mean, that was some of the creepiest stuff there. I mean, you're talking about you would hear footsteps going up the stairs. You assume somebody's coming up to knock on the door. There's nobody there. I had several instances where I was inside of my room and my partners come in and start asking, like, hey, what are you banging around in here, or what's being knocked around? And there was nothing. I was just in there. So they would hear weird things, everything from stuff being moved to feeling somebody holding you down. That was one of the more common things, I think, since I started, from the prior people before me. That was one of the big things, is that they would wake up and it felt like somebody was on top of them and wouldn't let them up. And that carried on all the way up until the last day that building was there. That's probably the one common experience that they've experienced from way back in the day before I got there to the time that when I left.
Wow. Now, the building was, when I was looking at the old photos, the pumper building, that's the other building behind the main building, the main station, that was built, wasn't there before, but then they built it along with 2014 or something like that, right?
I think that was, about there. I think it was way sooner than that. I think it was closer to like the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. It was there before. I really don't remember when it was built. Yeah. That building, I don't remember how early that was, but I'm willing to guess somewhere in the early 2000s.
Now, there was
I joined Life Ambulance in 2007, and that building was already there. So I'm assuming maybe the late 90s, early 2000s.
Now, did you guys experience anything in this building there when you first started working there? Or did
No, that what had happened was back in the day, that was kind of it was a brand new building. It wasn't, I guess you could say, decked out to be used yet.
Mm-hmm.
So it was pretty empty up until about maybe, I would say, about 2012, 2013 is when we really started putting a lot of stuff in there and started using it, how we're using it now. But before that time, like I said, in 2007, that was still being used as just like a storage. We kept some trucks there, but we didn't really put any furniture or any TVs or nothing in there. So we really didn't stay in it.
Well, this is a picture from, let's see here, 2019, where the building is now gone. So right here, that's the empty lot where the hospital and all those things were at, correct?
Right, that's correct.
Now, I noticed in one of the older pictures, there was actually something here in the corner next to you guys. Do you remember what that was?
That was a 2-story house.
Oh.
You see, what we did is we had this really big plan of making a really big station. So we were at the beginning stage where we wanted to demolish the hospital and that building, and we were supposed to expand that whole property there. We're supposed to make this one really big building, and then because of budgets and issues with, I guess you could say, the tax money that was coming in, we weren't able to fulfill that. So that's something that we're hoping to do within the next few years. But that was the initial plan, was to knock it down and then start building.
Okay. Now, getting back to the pumper building that I was asking you about earlier, when we were there, one of the staff there, had sent us a picture, and she took a picture of herself in the pumper building itself. Are you familiar with that picture?
I heard about that picture yesterday. I've maybe seen it about a couple of times.
Okay. So this is what she sent us, and she said that basically she thought there was somebody in the background right here.
Yes.
Okay. Apparently, what we were told, it looks like a man or standing on top of some lockers that are over there. So just to let you know, we went ahead and I went ahead and looked at it and did a little bit of enhancement on it to see what it was, and what it turned out was it was a box. I don't know if you can.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a box. You could see the flaps, for lack of a better term. And up here, I believe there was something that was being stored there at the time. That's what they were telling me. One of the guys said he recalls seeing a hose up there. So I just wanted to show this to you and let you know that, yeah, it would have been great if it was one of those weird pictures, but unfortunately it's not. So yeah,
It makes sense because we have those CrossFit boxes, the ones that you jump on top of.
right.
We have some in that area, so I wouldn't doubt if somebody stacked it that high.
Okay. Well, great. So let's talk about August 18th. That's when we came in to do the investigation. It was on a Sunday. And I've had some people ask me, why do we do it on a Sunday? And I recall you guys had said that y'all had told me that that was your quietest night of the week, correct?
Supposed to be our quietest night,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, we thought so too until we showed up Sunday night. And I think one of them told me that he was very surprised because the story goes around that station, and I'm sure you're familiar with that, is that they've seen a little boy in the first building, the front building. That the story is, what, a boy ran into the garage. Is that what my understanding is?
Right. What it was is that there was a one of our bay doors was open, and one of our responders had his pickup truck there. So 3 guys were across the alley from that building. So I guess while they're talking, hanging out, I guess they noticed that there was a kid playing around the truck, which isn't uncommon. They're one of the neighbors' kids sometimes will go into our property and play. But it was dark. The only thing they could see is a silhouette of him playing around in there. So at one point, the kid jumps into the back of the truck, and one of the guys tells the other one, "Hey, we got to get rid of this kid. He's going to end up falling, hurting himself." So they're going to go over there and tell him to go home. So as they're going to cross the alley, they yell at him like, "Hey!" The kid jumps off the truck, runs inside the bay where we keep all the fire trucks. And so now all my guys are like, inconvenience. Like, oh, now we got to go find this kid and kick him out. So they enter the building to go look for him, can't find him. So now they're thinking, okay, he's hiding inside one of the trucks. So they start looking through the trucks, nothing. They start going through the compartments, nothing. Long story short, they searched that building up and down. They never found that kid. But all 3 of them they'll testify and say that they did see it.
Okay. So one of the other stories they told us that if the little kid is seen, that's when things become active for you guys, meaning you have a big increase in calls and things like that.
Yes, I've seen the kid a couple of times, and honestly, my guys will probably have more information on that than I do, but I don't pay attention to that stuff. Usually it's just, I've seen the kid maybe twice, which is kind of weird. You figured with my many years there that I would see it more often, but no, I've only seen it twice. I just couldn't remember if it was busy around that time. But I know a lot of my guys that have mentioned that, once you start seeing something, there's either an influx of calls or an influx of activity in the building. So it's always signaling something.
Okay. So the night we were there, again, it was Sunday. You guys specifically asked for that because it was going to be a quiet night, or so we thought.
Right.
And then later on, as the night wore on, next thing I know, you guys, your people are responding to all sorts of calls that night. Everything from what I think it was something like a heart attack or something resembling that, all the way to a stabbing that occurred that night as well.
Yes. So statistically, I handle all the record keeping of the calls. I track calls. So when the busiest days are, so I can start, try to find people for certain times of the day. Sunday night has always been the slow nights. So a lot of the times I really don't have to worry about coverage because there really isn't anything at all. You have your drunks and your accidents Fridays and Saturday nights. So usually Sunday is a hangover night. people are getting ready to go to work on Monday morning. So I mean, there's never any issues. But for some odd reason, you had the crazy calls. You had a stabbing, an assault, heart attack. I mean, that was a busy night, and I was surprised that we got that many calls. Even if we do get a call or a couple of calls on a Sunday night, it's usually like your coughs, your sneezes, your chest pain,
Right.
maybe some shortness of breath and all.
Oh, I know. One of the guys I remember came back and he goes, "Yeah, we had to we had to do a burpee on somebody's chest." I was like, "Okay, I don't know what that meant, but so what exactly is a burpee? I'm curious."
I have no idea. Unless they meant maybe CPR. That's the only thing I can think of. But I mean,
it was related to the stabbing victim that they had out there. That they had to burp the chest, maybe, I guess.
oh yeah, okay, so that makes sense now.
Okay.
When you burp a chest, what it is when you get stabbed in the lung, air starts to escape into the lung and it starts to collapse it.
Oh, I see.
And so what you do is there's a way that you can try to get the air escape, and that's what they call burping. There's a procedure that you do so you can try to get the air to escape. So yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Because I was working in the hospital when that guy came in, and yeah, he did have a collapsed lung.
Okay. Well, that was one of the things that they told us when they got back was that, and I was like, okay, supposedly a quiet night. I wasn't sure about that.
Supposed to be quiet.
Yeah. So what we're gonna do here is, so we talked about y'all had told us about the little boy in the garage, and so that night, I don't know if you recall, we had put out what we call some motion activated light panels. This was the first time. No, I'm sorry, the second time we had used this during an investigation, and we weren't sure what kind of results we were going to get. But just to kind of let people know what it means, or what it is that these are light panels. As you can see, there's 8 lights on there. They're infrared lights, and what it is that they're activated by motion. So the only way you can really trigger these objects is if you walk directly over them, interrupting the beam of light. So this is an example right here when we're setting it up, and people can see that they're actually testing it. Okay. So these were a couple of the PRI investigators that night that were with us. I don't really recall them. One of them was Myra Padaka. The other one was Emily Olguin. And it was a hot night that night, I can tell you that for a fact. So we set that up in the area they told us they saw the child or the kid run through. So we also set up some additional equipment right in there. I don't know if you can see it or not, but we set up additional EMF devices, electromagnetic field detectors. And the theory is if something is there, it's going to trigger these things and it'll signal to us. So we said, okay, great. So then we left. Okay. Now, the weird part is that when we left the building, and only when we left the building, the lights got triggered. And I'll show you what I mean. So you all saw the lights moving, right? There's nobody in there. We don't know what caused these lights to be triggered. Now, typically what we do is when we investigate, and I'm sure you remember, David, we investigate in 2 phases. We'll go in there, we'll investigate for a couple of hours, and then we'll take a break. We'll let things kind of settle down, and then we'll come back and reinvestigate for a couple of more hours. Well, these light panels, for some odd reason, triggered a total, and you may remember when we went back to review with you, but it triggered a total amount of 8 times. and only when the building was empty. It never
Oh,
triggered when anybody was in there. We actually had people walk by those things to see if they could trigger it, and it didn't react to them at all. You heard the train on this one, I'm assuming, right? Were you able to hear the
yes.
train? Well, some people had asked, thought, well, maybe the train, the sound or the motion of the train activated this, or the vibrations. I just want to clarify is that these things are not motion activated. It can only be triggered by movement above the panel. So having said that, this was the next incident as an example. Again, when the building is empty. Sorry, let me get back over here. So again, and the weird part is that the EMF meters and the devices we had there didn't react at all. And I was kind of at a loss to see what was going on. But like I said, it happened 8 times when we were there. And it always happened when we were out of the building. This is the interesting part right here. So this one happened 1 minute before Emily and Myra walked in and turned on the lights. I don't know if you saw this particular clip or not, but this happened 1 minute before, almost as whoever was triggering this knew this was the last call. Now, in the paranormal world, we call that an intelligence, something that interacts. Like I said, a total of 8 times that night, nothing around it, nothing heard, nothing unusual. What are your thoughts about something like this?
Honestly, I was really surprised. The fact that things are happening when we're not there kind of gets me to wonder what is happening when we're not there. I mean, as it is, we already have enough stories when we are there that we can testify to. But I mean, now I'm wondering what exactly is going on when everybody's gone, you know?
Has that prompted anybody to maybe set up a camera when they're gone from, they go off their shift and come back the next day and then see what they recorded, just out of curiosity?
I've done it a few times. And for some odd reason, I keep getting technical difficulties. I've used a couple of different camcorders. I've used GoPros. And for some odd reason, I would just get some sort of, especially with the camcorders, I would get some sort of like it'll cut off, or the audio would come in kind of weird. So I don't know, like I've tried before, and I didn't have any sort of luck.
Really? Wow.
I mean, I did it before back in the hospital, and I think when the hospital, I'm sorry, in the hospital building, one of the videos, and I wish I had it, my computer, it went, crazy on me already, but I had caught footsteps in one of the hallways. One of our other firefighters, did a couple of recordings, some audio recordings. We heard the name Michael. There's another story behind that. And I wish we had the audio. It's just, that was so long ago. Things get lost. But yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, the kind of stuff that's going on there that we don't get to witness.
So what's the story about Michael? This is the first I'm hearing about this.
Okay, so back at, when I first started, we decided to walk around with the little recorder and started asking questions in the hospital area. And one of the questions that we had asked was, "What's your name?" And we got the response that said Michael. Clear, just really clear voice that said Michael. And it was weird because that was like the only voice that we caught that night. Well, about maybe a few months later, I'm talking to an old colleague of mine that used to work at Life Ambulance, and he had asked me, "How are the ghosts, doing at the station?" And jokingly, so I told him, "Oh, they're doing great. We caught a voice on one of our investigations." So he asked, he's like, "What was the name?" And I said, "Michael." And quickly, the hair on his arm started going up, and he looked, he looked surprised. And I'm like, "Why? What happened?" And he says that back in the day when he was working there, he had a permanent partner. His name was Michael Sebastian. Michael Sebastian passed away back in 2008. And so he told me that when they were working together and they would joke around about the ghost, Michael had told Tony, "The day that I die, I'm coming back and haunting this place." And so it's really weird that name came up. And after that, we started getting people talking about they would see a tall white guy with glasses, which is what Michael looked like. He was a tall older guy with glasses. So that surprised me. Once I heard they made the connection of the Michael, yeah, that blew me away.
Wow. So we're going to move on over to the Pumper building, that building behind the front, the main building, I guess. How about there? Did you ever experience anything there? I know some people told me there was some things that they encountered in there, and there were some interesting stories. One of them involving your fire chief. Is that correct?
I don't remember the one with my fire chief. I wasn't there for that one.
Okay.
But I know, me personally, in that back building, I saw a shadow person twice. I would hear footsteps. And that's mostly what I experienced there. A lot of our other guys said they've seen a kid in that building. Just various different things in that building. But I think that one, I had more experiences in that one than I did on the front building.
Okay. Yeah, there was when we were there that night, there was one part of the back building that a couple of the guys on duty that were there with us that night said they didn't particularly like. There was just something about them that they felt they felt not wanted there in one particular area. So in this clip that I want to show you, one of them is actually walking by that area. It's toward the front of the bay, where the front of the trucks are at, and
Right.
you'll see him react. Let me just move this over. Now, I'm going to play it one more time so you can see his reaction, okay? So after that, he came and he talked to me, and he talked to Emily, and he talked to Myra. He was telling us that when he walked by that area, that he heard something, which prompted him to immediately turn around to see what it was. But he said that he just got this overwhelming feeling at that moment that he was unwelcome in that area. He doesn't know why, he said, but he said, "I'm not going back there again tonight." He goes, "Because something does not want me there." Have you?
What's really interesting? What's really interesting, Romero, is the first time that I saw a shadow figure was in that area that camera is at. My experience with that shadow person was I came around that corner that he's at, and I had two firefighters that were changing right there by the lockers. They had just come back from a call. When I came around the back of that truck there, I saw a shadow go from like where that camera is situated to the front of the truck. And I thought somebody was in there. So I remember asking them, Who else is here? And they're like, no, it's just us. So I went around the back of the truck to see what was that crossed over to the other side in front of the truck, and there was nobody there. And that was the first time I saw a shadow person. And so that's why it doesn't surprise me that he probably had an experience there.
Well, these are the lockers now, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. So he came back and he told us that. So it was me and Emily and it was one of the other staff on duty that night. I'm trying to remember her name.
Anaí?
Anaim, yes. So we all walked back over there to see if we could have that same experience or maybe feel what he felt. And I'm going to play that clip for you there. So again, just to kind of recap, that was me, Emily, Myra, the two investigators, and Anaim with us. We walked through there. We didn't hear anything. We didn't feel anything out of the ordinary. But the interesting thing is that just EVPs is something called, it's electronic voice phenomenon for many people who know about this, right? And so what the thing is about EVPs is that a lot of times we ourselves don't hear them. And the electronic or audio equipment that we carry will definitely record it, but we don't hear it. That's the whole thing about that. That's what's so unusual. So in this particular case, we're walking through that area. We don't hear anything out of the ordinary. But this is what the camera wound up recording. So I don't know how well you could hear it on your end.
Mm-hmm. I can hear it, yeah.
Okay, what did you hear? Do you remember?
I heard "let me in."
Yeah, but the interesting thing is that there's another voice in there that kind of goes, did you hear that?
Yes, I did.
That sounds like a young child's voice.
Yes,
said,
sir.
let me in. Again, we were surprised. We weren't expecting that in that area at all. So there was another part of that Bay Area that I don't have any video or any audio at that point because we had left the cameras in another part of the building. But there was one section where one of the investigators, Emily, kept telling me she didn't like that one particular area, but she was being drawn to it. So I walked over to that area, and I just experienced a numbness or tingling in my face. It was more of a numbness than anything else. It was weird. I just didn't know what to make of it. So without telling Emily, I called her over and I asked her, do you feel anything here? And she told me she was feeling the same thing that I was feeling, but not knowing that what I was experiencing. Anyway, do you remember when afterwards I asked you about that? Or I told you about that story, and what did you tell me? Which kind of knocked me down. It just, you could have knocked me over with a feather at that point when you told me that.
Yeah. Well, we had a gentleman, a responder of ours that was there early 2000s, late 90s. His name was George, and he had a couple of misunfortunate events where he ended up having a stroke. He did have a heart attack, multiple strokes, multiple heart attacks. And at one point before he passed away, he was paralyzed, I believe, from the left side. And so when you all started talking about that, I'm like, well, that's kind of weird because those resemble stroke symptoms, which you guys were feeling, which is coincidentally what that gentleman that passed away had. So yeah, that's what I was thinking. He passed away not more than a few years ago, and so I believe that he's probably still there.
Well, let me ask you, on stroke symptoms, that also include headaches?
Yes.
Okay. And the reason I asked that because one of the investigator, Emily, kept experiencing a headache the entire time she was in there.
Well, what'll happen usually is that you'll get the headache before you start seeing the stroke symptoms.
Right.
The headache is usually the beginning sign, whether it's like, you start with the tissue loss. Once you start with tissue loss, then you start, experiencing the symptoms once that tissue breaks down. So that's the beginning sign of a stroke sometimes.
Yeah, and she told me afterwards when we were driving away that she had had a headache the minute she set foot on the property. Or she developed a headache, yeah, and it never went away until we left. And then of course then we run into this thing about this particular thing you told me about, and I was like, wow, I was in shock.
Yeah.
So so from what I understand, in that particular area where we were experiencing that, I think your chief or one of the other guys said that was the area that one guy, the one who had the strokes, was that the area he considered his own, or he was kind of proprietary about it?
That's what I heard. I wasn't there when he was there. I didn't really start talking to him until after he started having complications after he left the department. But my understanding was he was kind of protective over, parts of the station. So I mean, I really wouldn't doubt that that's probably his, because that's where we have the hydraulic lifts for the trucks. That's where we have all our tools, um, all our hardware stuff, all of like your cutting tools, things. So that's pretty much our mechanic / handyman area. So I wouldn't doubt that would be his area.
Yeah, well, some of the other guys in there told me about, they had actually, you mentioned earlier about seeing a shadow figure. They had said they had seen a shadow figure to the front, or I think that would be the back of the Bay building,
Mhm.
coming from the main building, that they had one of the doors open and then they saw the shadow just dart across in that area. Do you remember, or did any of them tell you about that?
I've heard a bunch of stories about the shadow people. I wouldn't doubt if one of them had told me about it, honestly.
Really? Okay.
I mean, I've heard it from the kitchen area. I've heard it, coming down the hall. Um, my personal experience, they've seen it everywhere. I mean, I don't think there's like one spot in that fire department that people haven't seen something weird at.
Really? Okay. So now we're going to go into the hallway where the bathrooms are at, and also going toward the kitchen and the break area. And one of the things that they told us was, this is what I was mentioning about your fire chief. They said that he was standing up there with his back to the hall, and I guess he was given some sort of training class or something. And it was in broad daylight, and they said they saw this dark shadow walk right behind him,
Oh, yeah.
like they're going to go. The way they described the shadow was, it was walking behind the chief, walking toward the women's bathroom area.
Yeah, he was the assistant chief back then. He was doing a training class, and we had several individuals in that room. I wasn't there. I heard the story about it afterwards, and I guess with his back turned towards that hallway, that they did see something dark just pass right through him and then go through one of the doors there. Um, but anybody that was paying attention to him saw it. You have some of the individuals that weren't paying attention, didn't see it. But I remember hearing the story afterwards, and they have this, more than one, two, three people see it and testify to it. That's pretty amazing.
Well, somebody also said that they've seen a nurse also walking in that area. She comes like from one dead end hallway that you have there to in that same path.
Hmm. Yes, I don't know about like the nurse. I've never seen the nurse. I've heard the footsteps in that area, and I've seen the shadow. The one that peeks out of the kitchen. I've seen something through there before. Um, I know somebody had mentioned once about the nurse. I'm not sure exactly, because the nurse experience that I've had was back at the live station. That's when I started hearing about the three entities there. That there was the Michael, the nurse, and the kid. Um, I even heard of a story from my dad back in the 60s where he saw a nurse over there in the old hospital. But the nurse on that side of the building, I have no idea. I've heard some stories. I just can't recall any of them right now.
Yeah, they told us that one of them told us they had actually seen a nurse walking through it.
Hmm.
Now, the others probably heard the other stories about the nurse and they just assumed maybe that's who the shadow was. But it's interesting that they mentioned that. And so we actually had set up some equipment in the break room, and one of the EMTs was getting ready to go for the night. And it's kind of funny though, because he was telling me that he feels he has a rapport with whoever's there, and that he says I'm cool with them, I'm good with them. So this is our camera equipment recording as he's walking out the door. He's I guess he's going home. But listen to what he says. So it's kind of faint, but what he's basically saying, hey guys, I'm gone. But you know what? If you can go ahead and show yourself, kind of in a nutshell, saying, if you can show up, cooperate, show these people that you're here, that would be really great, that kind of stuff, right? And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, that's really cool for him to do that. Um, so we went back and we're reviewing this, and right after he says that, something is heard. So let me just pause it there for a second. There was a little click on the camera as he's talking and he's asking for their cooperation. And it's weird because this camera doesn't make that kind of noise. Let me go back and play it for you real quick. Okay. Then after that, all of a sudden the radio that you guys had in there um, made this weird noise. I don't know if that's normal or not. Is that normal radio to do that?
No, what happened is that we upgraded our system to digital. I'm not the technical type of person, but I know once we upgraded our system, we stopped having interference and things like that. The thing with our radio mics is you have to keep it pressed and then it clicks and then you can transmit. So for it to, these little quick little spots of noise, there's no way because you have to hold on to it for like about maybe a good 2 seconds and then you're able to talk to it. So for it to just, three little spots back to back that quick, I've never heard it do that before.
Okay. So let's go and continue playing this. So let me jump ahead there to where. So I don't know if you could hear this over this broadcast, but it sounds like a high-pitched voice. I don't know if you were able to hear that.
I wasn't able to catch it. No.
Yeah.
It might be my speakers.
Yeah. Well, we recorded what sounds like a high-pitched voice there, which is interesting because it sounds, again, like a young child, but this is after the guy asked and encouraged whoever was there to cooperate with us that night. So it was interesting for us to record this sound when the building is empty and this happens. So the other one is in the kitchen area. If I remember correctly, it was a hallway, and then you had a kitchen, and you had a break room where you have some of the people who there's a TV room and that kind of, there's a TV in there with a couch, right?
Right.
Okay. Now, you were mentioning earlier about the radio, and somebody actually has to hold this or key the mic, right?
Right.
So this was recorded in that same room, but there's something unusual about that. Let me play that for you. So there's nobody in this room, okay? Okay, so you hear what appears to be normal traffic coming across, right?
Right.
Okay, let me play this to you and see if there's some other voice that you hear.
Oh, yeah.
So you remember that, right?
Yes.
Do you remember what it said, or do you recall what it said?
Wasn't it a name or something?
Yeah, we think it said. I think we were tossing around whose name it could be, and I think one of the guys said that it sounded like Stephanie, and they said that was a name of one of the dispatchers, or it was a name that sounded very similar to one of the dispatchers' names.
Oh, okay.
But they're saying that if traffic was coming across, you would have heard it like in the other part.
Right, because it sounds like there's two voices going on, but usually you can't step on the other traffic.
Right.
It only allows one traffic to go through, and so if you try to key while somebody's talking, it shuts you out. Like you'll get like an error message or like an error tone. So there's no way that two people can be communicating at the same exact time.
Yeah, and so it sounds like a woman's voice in there just before the radio kicks in with a transmission, but there's also the voice can be heard under the transmission. So, and you said it's a digital radio, so it should not be doing that, can't do that.
No,
correct?
it shouldn't be doing that.
Okay. So the other one we also recorded was there's one particular hallway right next to the kitchen where they said they have seen this dark shadow go in there. Have you ever seen anything like that at all?
I have. I've seen, and it's off of like your peripheral sometimes, or even sometimes the lights are in there or turned off, and you'll swear you'll see something like peek out and peek back in. We get that a lot. We get a lot of our guys talking about that.
Okay. One of the things that we did is we put what's called a REM pod, which is basically an EMF device, and with an antenna. So we put it in that corner. Nothing happened until this train. You can't hear it initially, but it's interesting because it starts reacting before you even hear the train. So shortly after that, you hear a train passing by because there's a train like within what 300 feet from you all.
Yeah.
So one of the things about this REM pod, and I had some people ask me about that, the REM pod is not motion activated either. Something has to physically get close to the antenna in order for it to react that way. And that was the only time it happened that one night. But it was really interesting because when we were in there earlier, I think I don't know if you were there with us. I believe you had left, but when we had walked in there, we actually heard what sounded like tapping noises coming from the little kitchen to the left. So, but we didn't get it on camera, unfortunately. Now, this is the one that really, I think, did it for us and for a lot of people, is the guys all of us stepped out, and we're outside in the main patio or the front entrance of that building, and it's investigators, our PR investigators, Emily, Myra, and Annalie. They went into the women's bathroom. They were curious to see, well, besides having to go take a nature break, of course, we were just curious to see if anything, but they could hear anything out of the ordinary. So they're in the bathroom, and the camera in the hallway records this. You remember that? Were you
Yeah.
here? So let me play the audio for you, just so that you can hear it clearly. Now, did that sound like a young voice to you?
It did. It sounded like a teen, probably even younger than that.
But were you able to make out the words? Do you remember what it said?
I can't hear too well because of my speaker, but I believe that's the one where it says coffee, monster, water.
Right. It says coffee, water, monster.
Yeah.
And I couldn't remember why we were trying to figure out why it kept saying that. And you said that a lot of EMTs and a lot of the people that work there, that's what they like to drink, right?
Yes. Usually, I mean, we have water galore, we have a coffee machine, and then we have our guys that are into energy drinks.
Okay.
So that makes a lot of sense. They say that that's why they've had that joke. EMS runs on caffeine. Because of the coffee and the energy drinks.
So the monster would be related to like the Monster energy drink.
Yeah, that's what I would assume.
Well, when we did the thing with, you may not remember, but we did the thing with Kiss FM. We did on air with them about your guys' location. And when they played that clip, we actually had somebody from Verizon call in during the broadcast and said, "Oh, coffee, water, monster makes sense because that's what our people are drinking all the time." So it's not just you guys there. It looks like.
No, it's everywhere. I mean, all the departments. I mean, I'll even give you an example. See, I got that perfect coffee, monster and water. So it makes total sense. I'll even give you another one. Coffee. All three things that they're talking about.
Okay, well, yeah, all right. If you hear that voice there when you're sleeping tonight, don't let me warn you.
Oh man.
On the other thing also is that we talked about what happened afterwards. Do you remember that?
Yes. Very vividly, yes.
Yeah. So just to kind of let people know what we did, we returned on September 16th to review what we had found with you guys. And as we were going through this, one of the things we found in the past, in other cases, is sometimes what we review is something starts acting up. I guess maybe it's triggering something there. So this was one of those cases where we're showing this thing to you guys, and all of a sudden the REM pod starts reacting. Remember we had placed it in the hall where they've seen the shadow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the interesting thing is that this thing is actually responding to the PRI investigator that was with me that day. That was Emily. Let me play that for you.
Okay.
Get which one? That?
Yeah. Okay, we're at the Fabens Fire and Rescue. We're talking. We're giving the presentation, and this one starts going off where they have seen the shadow. Can you ask him to see if they can do it again?
Could you light up that again for us? Thank you very much. We appreciate that.
See if we can narrow it down. If this is the nurse that has been seen here.
If this is the nurse that has been seen in this building,
Oh, sorry,
could
that's
you
mine.
make it light up for us?
Just heard a voice behind me. Is there something behind me? Go,
I didn't hear you.
yeah. Was it? Asked her, was that you?
Was it you that was making that sound over there by them?
Can make it real close to it to make it change. I'll roll all the way to the ridge.
Could you get really close to it and make the light go all the way to red?
Is your train going back? No. Yeah. Just wanted to double check because of the cooler behind me is on. Okay, ask it. Is it the little boy that's facing here?
Is it the little boy that has been seen here?
One last question to ask him. Is there the shadow that has been seen walking through here?
Is this the shadow that has been seen? Do you want us to stop asking questions?
Okay, that's one of the EMTs on site. Sign.
So it was responding to Emily when she asked if it was the nurse, the REM pod responded. But when she asked if it was the shadow person they've seen, or was it the little boy they've seen, no response whatsoever. Now, Emily has a unique connection, I think. She has she has empathic abilities, which I think make things, whatever's out there, more responsive or more receptive to her. This is not the first time this has happened with her, where she'll ask her questions and it actually responds to her. So you remember, David, after this, we decided, well, we're going to take a break. We're going to go get pizza because we were hungry and we were bringing it back, right? So we were gone. What did you guys do?
We were sitting at the living room, waiting for you guys to come back, and then we heard the REM pod go off. It got left on, and we heard it go off. So I told Saul, I'm like, hey, let's go play with it. Let's go see what's going on. So then that's when I went over to start recording, and I got more than I was expecting.
Let me play that video clip. That's the one where you were recording, right?
Yes. Keep in mind that the ghost doesn't like when you cuss. From all the stories that I've heard before, and I guess with this video, you're going to find out it still holds true.
Listen closely to what David says here.
That's awesome. Is this the nurse? Fucking shit. Are you upset? You're not upset? Are you mad? Are you okay with us being here? You just not wanting to talk to us? that a yes?
If yes, light up. If no, don't light up.
Is there anybody else besides the nurse here? It's still working.
Oh, dude, it's like the whole freaking energy out.
Yeah, it's not working.
You know that little. It's like the whole energy out. No power out of it.
So, you folks, I don't know if you heard it or not, but David was taken by surprise and let loose with a couple of colorful words when it went off. And then you remember that it right after you said that, that thing just went ballistic.
Yes. It surprised. So, I mean, I've never had an experience like that before. That was pretty amazing.
But we found out when we came back that the battery had been drained completely, which was unusual because that battery there was a new battery had been put in there before we even went out there. So the thing is that when I saw the video that you sent me on that, my first impression was that when it started going ballistic, it was like somebody was mad at you, or somebody was mad, not necessarily you, but somebody was mad.
Mm-hmm.
But it was when we saw the video on that, you cussed, we figured, oh, maybe if it is the nurse, because they did respond to Emily when she asked if it was the nurse. And you remember our conversation, we said, well, maybe it'd be a good idea for you to apologize, because nurses back then were prim and proper. They wouldn't put up with that kind of talk.
And then when I was working at Life Ambulance in that one building, that was one of the things that they always said: when you have an experience, don't cuss, because the nurse doesn't like that. And there's a bunch of different things. There was the don't cuss, otherwise she'll mess with you. And then we had this little, I guess, like a group of toys that we had on a certain table that you wouldn't touch, because otherwise the kid will come and mess with you. So that was one of the things. So when I cussed and all that started happening, I'm like, well, that's exactly what they warned me about years back. Don't cuss.
Well, this was interesting when it happened, because you went back and you apologized, and what happened?
But I ended up getting experience that night.
You had an experience at home, or there?
Yes. Well, see, I apologized over there, and I don't think I had I don't remember the video. I don't think I got a reaction. I remember it. I made an apology, and later that night, this is the weird part, because I was assuming it was the nurse that I upset, and I still believe that was the nurse that I upset. So I don't know if it's just a coincidence of what happened the next morning. I get up pretty early for work. I usually get up at about 5:30 in the morning. My wife and kids are always asleep. It's always just me getting up that early. And my alarm goes off. I get up, and I'm just sitting on the edge of the bed, just trying to wake up, trying to collect myself. And then out of nowhere, I hear somebody say, "David," clear as day, manly voice. That's why I was kind of confused about the nurse and the fact that I heard a guy voice. Clear. And I jumped. I thought somebody was in the room with me. I looked over to my right side to where I heard it. There's nothing there. And so I'm like, okay, maybe it's my oldest son. Walk right into the living room, and there's nobody. Everybody's asleep. But I know that I heard my name called out. So I believe whatever happened, with all the activity that was going on, I wouldn't doubt that somebody went home, that if something followed me and just gave me one last, I guess you say, like, one last jab before they left me alone, that's like a payback or something. I don't know.
I know that when I think it was Saul who was with you that day. He was kind of like, yeah, I kind of figured it was going to happen.
Oh yeah, because it's Saul's been there for years, and he kind of knows He's there more often than a lot of our guys. He's one of our paid guys that is there from 6 to 3. So he spends 40 hours a week in that station, and it's usually just him and one partner. So they hear all the noises, they hear all the creaks and all the, whatever you want to say that they hear. So yeah, I think he's got some sort of a connection with that station.
So now that the investigation is over and some time has passed, how are things there now? How are things with people there? How do you feel about it? How do you think people feel about it? Yeah.
So we sat down afterwards, me and a bunch of the fire guys, and we're saying about how before the investigation, it just seemed tense. There'd be times where we show up and we're kind of afraid, we have that feeling like somebody's watching over us or looking, that they're there with us. And we would get all these experiences, and there was always something going on, always. And during the time of the investigation, it seemed like it was really active, like it was trying to show us or trying to prove a point now that you guys are there. But not long afterwards, it just seemed like everything calmed down. It went from feeling a little tense in certain areas to all of a sudden just like this calm kind of a feel in both buildings. And it's kind of weird. My guys were saying that they stopped hearing stuff, they stopped experiencing things. And I don't know if it's that it just stopped happening while we were there and just started happening more when we weren't there, or if maybe what it was that we recorded just wanted to be heard and known that it's there. And then now it's proved its point, and it seems like it calmed down. I mean, since the investigation, I haven't really heard voices. I haven't seen anything. I've heard footsteps, but I think that's the most. I mean, I'll be there by myself sometimes, and it doesn't feel like there's something like keeping an eye on me as much as it did before. So I don't know if it's just happy that it showed itself or something, that that we acknowledge that it's there. Because before, we would always attribute all these noises to just metal clinking, clanking, the settling of the structure. So we always had an excuse for the stuff we were hearing. And I guess maybe it just kept wanting to prove itself. And then now that we see all this visual, all this video and audio proof, I think now it's just calm and saying, okay, fine, I finally got through to you guys. And that's my feeling, and I think that's why we're starting to experience a lot less, because it finally proved its point. We acknowledged it, and I think it's just calm now.
How about the other guys? Have they also feel the same way, the other folks that are there?
Yes. A lot of the guys were talking about that ever since the investigation, it just seems calmer. It seems more comfortable.
How about Anna V? How does she feel about that? Because I know she was really hesitant for a while there during the investigation.
I honestly, I haven't really talked to her a whole lot. We kind of have different schedules. Usually when I'm there, I don't see her. Whenever she's there, I'm not there. So I'm not entirely sure. I know we've seen her more often. It doesn't seem like, like she's fazed by it anymore. Before, we used to scare each other. We'd scare the new guys and be like, hey, watch out, there's a ghost here. Try to scare them a little bit. And a lot of them are like, I didn't even experience anything, so I think it's calmed down a lot.
I know one of them was telling us that it was about a couple of months later that I guess they had one of the local law enforcement, I guess, from the El Paso, maybe the sheriff's department or the police department or somebody like that, had gone over to the station there one day, and they were there on duty, and the person said, hey, I hear about your ghost. Let me go see. I want to go experience it. And that when he went in there, he pulled his flashlight out to shine the light in certain spots, and the flashlight just died on him. He said that the guy kind of freaked out because he goes, I just put brand new batteries on it this morning. I haven't used it, so I don't know what's going on. But if I remember correctly, I think the guy told me, he goes, well, they're showing you, don't come in here and mess with them.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. I know there's a deputy that's been trying to get over to our station to check it out. I didn't know he had already gone over. This is the first I heard of it, but I wouldn't doubt that it's probably just trying to prove a point to any newcomers or any doubters or so,
Well, one of the things that we talked about in the past as to why was your place so active? I mean, I've been in some places before, and what we got on the light panels, especially in that Bay Area, was really amazing because I've never seen that happen before. So that got me thinking, why is your place so active? So I kind of looked at a map and kind of trying to figure out, and in the paranormal world, there's certain things that can act as like triggers for activity in a location or contribute to it. And I think I mentioned before, I believe that your location is what's considered in the eye of a perfect storm. Because
Yes.
you remember that conversation?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So I actually put together a little video, kind of give you an idea why I think it's in a perfect storm. Okay. I'll play it for you, and then that way you'll see what I'm talking about. So X marks the spot where the old hospital used to be at. It's now an empty lot. So the whole thing is that in the paranormal world, it's believed that things like high voltage power lines or which you guys, you have a high voltage substation right next to you, remember?
Yes.
And so one of the theories in the paranormal world is that stuff like that can contribute to activity. But as you can see here, there's other things that occur. There's that old, let me go back over here. Well, first off, you guys are located right next to where the hospital used to be at, which in itself was already having activity there, correct?
Right.
Then right across the street from you guys, I was shocked. Right across the street in the corner, there's a funeral home. Okay. Then there's a church. You got your high voltage power lines going on there. Then you got a church, again, right across the street on the opposite side. Then one of the theories that in the paranormal world is that if you have an active railroad line, every time you have a train that passes by, it generates energy. Okay. So we saw that in one of the REM pods when it started going off shortly before a train could even be heard. And then the other theory is that running water helps to contribute to activity because it creates, or it has to do with energy on that. I'm not too deeply knowledgeable about that particular part, but that's one of the theories out there. So if we take all of that together, what's right in the middle?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the station. So the fact that the hospital was torn down may have started contributing to what you guys were experiencing there, because they moved on. Whatever they knew back then was there, but they decided to take up residence next door. But with everything else going on, they said, well, it's a perfect spot for us.
Oh yeah, I agree. And it's kind of weird because that whole area of Fabens has all sorts of like weird stuff, like the building across the street right there on the other side of Alameda. That area right there. I mean, I know some people that have been in those houses that have lived there. They've had all sorts of crazy activity, and they see full figure apparitions, shadow people. That river there that you see, the canal, the La Llorona. I know a lot of people say that they've seen La Llorona there. I mean, it's crazy stuff. I mean, that's probably the oldest area of Fabens, because that I guess back in World War II, that railroad line, they had an internment camp there in Fabens. And so that railroad area that you have there, That's where they used to, in that area of our station. That's where they used to offload these people that they were taken to the internment camps back in the 40s during World War II. And it's one of those things that not a whole lot of people know unless you've done your research. But I was part of a project with EPCC trying to find some of the history, and that's exactly where, like I said, they offloaded. I think it was German families and Japanese families,
Wow.
and they took them to a little camp that was in that area.
Wow. That's interesting. I bet you, yeah, like you said, a lot of people don't know that, and I didn't know that either until now.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, it's interesting you mentioned that because in Lordsburg, they had a World War II prisoner of war camp over there as well, and later on it turned into a Japanese internment camp. But they had Italian and German POWs there, and then Japanese Americans there. But some bad things happened there, and to this day, I've talked to some law enforcement who have reached out to me, who patrol that area, and they said that sometimes at night they'll see these mysterious blue lights from where that camp used to be at, but they know there's nothing there now, so they can't explain whatever's happening there. So that's interesting. There's an interesting connection there between here now and Lordsburg.
Yeah. And then also, I mean, back in the Pancho Villa raids, I mean, I know that they had gone. I know that they had the troop station in that area, just a little further north of that, off of Camp Street, between the railroad tracks and the next road. They did have some of the American troops there fighting for during that whole that thing with the Pancho Villa thing. So it's got a lot of history in that area around the railroad tracks. I think the further away you go from Fabens, like the outskirts, you receive less stories. But I mean, there's a lot of history there. I mean, I'm sure there's other stuff that I don't know about, but those are the main things that I found out during I guess you could say, that research with community college.
Wow. Well, it's really fascinating. It was really great for us to go over there. We really appreciated you giving us the opportunity to go in there and investigate. At least we hoped to corroborate or ensure that maybe that you guys weren't experiencing, or not experiencing, but you guys weren't imagining these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think what it is I wouldn't say that we were imagining. I don't think we would think that we're imagining it. I think we kind of I think what really helped you guys go in there was that all these things that we got used to, the noises and stuff like that. We just, like I said, we just kind of dismissed it and thought, oh, it's just the usual noises. We would hear at one point I would hear footsteps, and I think I kind of just dismissed it as just, everyday noise. And then the fact that you guys came in and started saying like, hey, this stuff isn't normal. The fact that we hear it all the time and we thought it was normal, you guys came in and said, hey, you know what? There's no explanation for this. There's something going on here. And I'm glad you kind of opened our eyes to that. And that might have been even frustrating for the spirits that were there. They're probably like, hey, I'm trying to give you guys a sign, and you guys think I'm just the weather, or I'm just the wind, or I'm just the bay doors creaking, or So I'm glad you guys kind of brought that to our attention. It was an eye opener.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad that things have calmed down there, because, like you said, one of the things we have found in the past is sometimes they want recognition, because sometimes that's all they need before they can move on to wherever they need to be. And maybe all this time, and it's just a theory on my part, but maybe all this stuff that's been going on in the past up until that point was, like you said, it was their version of trying to get you all's attention there, to let you know we're here. I need you to recognize me or understand who I am, so that I can go on to where I need to be, or I can move on.
I completely agree, and I think that shows with what's going on now compared to what it was before, or even I'm kind of curious to see what happens during the winter, because that's or towards the end of the summer, because that's when we had all that activity going on. So I'm wondering if maybe the monsoon season kind of did something to it,
Yeah. Well, we shall see. But I'm sure you're going to keep us posted, right? Let us know how things are going.
Oh yeah, I'll let you know. I'll definitely keep you in touch.
Great. Well, David, I want to say thank you very much. I really appreciate the time you've taken to spend, with us and talk to some of the people and let people understand or see it from your perspective. We also want to make sure we, thank all the first responders out there, because I know you guys worked tirelessly. We saw it that night. We were there. I mean, you guys, your people showed up and they were going, yeah, we're responding to this. Okay, we'll be back. They came back like almost as nothing. Then, okay, we're gonna go respond to this. Okay, we came back, and they just picked up where they left off. So it was amazing for us to see that as well. I think if more people saw that, I think they would have a greater appreciation of what you guys do. So other than that, David, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, not that I can think of. I'm just grateful for that you. I mean, I think it's great that we got you to come down there. That you guys, I think it was just a great coincidence that they mentioned us a few times. Because I mean, we're kind of like that little small story that Fabens talks about every now and then, and they just dismiss. And I'm glad that people were referring us to you when you're looking for some of these experiences.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting though. I heard something else, and I don't know how true this is or not. If you want to confirm it or not, it's up to you. But I also heard there's this little rumor going around that there's a unofficial competition between stations to see whose is the most haunted. Have you heard of that?
I heard about it afterwards. I don't, because the thing is we've always known that we had some sort of activity. I think it's the other guys that are probably like, oh, we got a more haunted place. I've never competed. I never thought about competing. It's just something we accepted. I guess maybe because we're the first ones. I guess the next one was like, hey, let's try to turn it up a notch. And I mean, I've had experiences at that other place too, but if I'm cool with whatever. I'm just, if they have something more interesting than we have, then awesome. I would like to see it. But yeah, we're not competing. They might be.
All right. Well, listen, David, thank you again for all the time tonight. And this will be posted on Facebook, so you guys can, if whoever missed it, can go back and replay it, and then they can get an opportunity to listen to the different things that we played here. And I'm going to be honest with you, David. Don't be surprised if you have people start showing up at your front door, going, "Oh, is this the place?"
Yeah, we've already had a few people come up and. Yeah, we've had, we'll be out in public like, hey, we heard about your station. Hey, we saw you on Facebook. Hey, so yeah, I think it's a combination of the stuff that that you guys that put on Facebook, that UTEP journalism group. Yeah. So yeah, we've already gotten a few of those. So it's funny when he comes back around.
Yeah, just on to make sure next time they come around, bring the tamales or enchiladas, man.
I'll do that.
All right, David. Well, thank you again. I really appreciate it. And say hi to all the folks over there at the station from all of our team, okay?
I will, sir. Thank you, sir.
We thoroughly enjoyed it. All right, David. Have a good night, sir.
You too, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.